This meeting is being recorded.
Okay.
All right. Greetings, everyone. And we trust that others will join us. And I will report to you that Louisville is in good shape. And the weather is pretty nice. And we're welcome. We're glad all of us together. So Larry is going to take the ball now and present our guest presenter today. Larry.
Thank you, Bob. It's a privilege for me to introduce Rhonda Blevins, Reverend Dr. Rhonda Blevins. I first met Rhonda when she became a D-Min student at McAfee School of Theology. She was associate campus minister at that time at the University of Georgia. No, she had been at the University of Georgia, and she was associate pastor at the Calico Village Church south of Knoxville, a large congregation, multi-denominational, and she did a marvelous job of leadership and ruler of all kinds there. She just wasn't the pastor. She is a graduate of Southwestern Seminary in addition to McAfee. Presently, and today, I think most importantly, she is the pastor. Let me get my information correct now. The Chapel by the Sea in Clearwater Beach, Florida. Now, to be a successful pastor in a beach community is a major accomplishment. She is a superb preacher. I've heard her preach, and I can attest to that, and an outstanding leader. She also works with Pinnacle, and I hope at some point she will describe her work as a specialist in that. She's also an Enneagram specialist. So we're going to turn it to you, Rhonda, and we thank you for giving us your time and sharing your experiences with us.
Yeah, well, thank you for the invitation today. I wasn't sure who all was a part of this group. It's good to see some old friends and make some new friends today. Of course, Larry was one of my professors at McAfee, and by far that was the best educational experience I had in my whole journey was my D-Min at McAfee. Now, I like to say that I have a demon, but I don't have an STD like Larry. So maybe I'll try to add that to my repertoire one of these days. Larry gave me a bit of a daunting task. He said, "Tell us why you're an effective pastor." And I said, well, it depends on who you ask, whether that's true or not. But I thought I would start by telling you about my pretty awesome little church, Chapel by the Sea. I've had the pleasure of being the Sheridan's a very occasional pastor. I think they have a place down near us in Largo. And so we'll see them every now and again. And I think, Larry, you even joined us when you were visiting them with our live stream.
That's correct.
Yeah. So I'm going to try to share my screen and just introduce you to my little church. Are you seeing my Chapel by the Sea there?
Yes.
Okay. Clearwater Beach, Florida. You can see it's a beautiful little church. On the outside, it looks, sort of Spanish. Just some historical highlights. It was founded in 1949, so we're celebrating our 75th anniversary this year. Unlike a lot of churches, our church was interdenominational from its start. It was the combination, well, let me say the Presbyterian church just across the bridge was hosting a Bible study on the beach for, those who lived on the beach. And then in combination with some other ecumenical church leaders, they decided to help plant a church on the beach. And it was largely the influence of in our history book is called a little Canadian lady who said that she wanted to see a Sunday school for the children of Clearwater Beach. And so our church was built by snowbirds, and that snowbird word is going to come up again as I talk about the church. We are older than the International Council of Community Churches, but not by much. And so we were one of the first members of the International Council of Community Churches, what we call the ICCC. We're one of the strongest supporters of the ICCC, which is a small fledgling group of community churches. If you're not familiar with us, the story that we like to tell is that in 1950, a group of predominantly white community churches and a group of predominantly Black community churches came together in Chicago, and the leader of the white churches and the leader of the Black churches walked across the stage from opposite sides, shook hands, and formed this interracial International Council of Community Churches. And it was the first interracial sort of denomination, if you will, of its kind, and still probably the most integrated of all the denominations or networks. So through the ICCC, we're part of the National Council of Churches. We're also part of the World Council of Churches. So that's just a little bit of the history of Chapel by the Sea. Larry already kind of gave a pastoral trajectory, so I won't reiterate any of that. I'll add my time at CBF Kentucky. I was there twice. I was the associate coordinator for a couple of years. I went back about 8 years later to become the executive coordinator at CBF Kentucky. And I like to think of that time as an unintentional interim. If you understand what I mean there. There were some things internally I had to take care of, which ended me there. But so I was the executive there for about 2 years, and then I've been the pastor at Chapel by the Sea since 2017. If you'll forgive me, I'm battling COVID. I'm just now kind of getting over COVID, so I'm a little under the weather. So one of the things that I think is important when arriving at a new church, if you're the pastor, is to kind of do an assessment, a strengths assessment, a needs assessment. And so here are some observations that I made in my first few months at Chapel. One was that I appreciated their strong financials, their cash reserves. They don't have an endowment, still don't. And that's, if I'm here another 7 years, that will change, but solid financial footing. Another thing I appreciated is a strong music program, particularly the strong choir. And the reason and the way that they're able to maintain this strong choir is they pay professional singers. We have spots for up to 12 paid singers. And so that gives us the ability to maintain a strong choir, which is one of the big draws of a church on the beach or anywhere. Another strength of the chapel is its location, right? It's about 2 blocks from the beach. It's one of the most beautiful beaches anywhere. We have good, strong facilities. It's the only church on Clearwater Beach. And then I think it's a strength in this day and time to be interdenominational, not having the baggage that some denominations might have. And I think that's a strength that will help the chapel endure. And one thing with that, I had a friend tell me, we were talking about church decline, the whole narrative of church decline, and they're kind of familiar with my church, and they said, your church is going to be fine. And this friend, who is, by the way, a Southern grad, this friend of mine said, probably every community and every town will have a kind of cathedral, sort of one church that is able to kind of hold on and not have the narrative of church decline. He said, your church is going to be the cathedral. It's the only church on Clearwater Beach. I said, yeah, maybe you're right. So an interesting thought. Some opportunities or the needs assessment early on. The folks at Chapel by the Sea, when I first arrived, it seemed to me that they thought of church as more of a place instead of a people. Church is where they go on Sunday instead of the people that we are. And so I thought there was an opportunity there to help them become more of a community instead of just thinking of themselves as a place that, to go on Sundays. Another opportunity, and I wasn't sure where this would go initially, but just an observation is that the attendance basically doubles during snowbird season. So that stretch between around January, it starts in October, but really January through March is the big season, but October through about April. It doubles. And so one of the challenges is to increase this, the size of our, what I call the 365 club, the folks that are in Florida 365 days out of the year, which really doesn't exist because even the people who live in Florida get out of Florida this time of year. Another thing that I saw was they didn't have strong language that would unify the congregation. The mission statement was not strong. There wasn't really a vision statement. There wasn't a purpose statement. And that began to pose some problems during my tenure as pastor. And so I identified that as a challenge and something that we could work on. And then a 75-year-old building, begins to show its age. One of the things, if you were to come to visit my chapel today, if you looked up in the sanctuary at the light fixtures, those light fixtures are 75 years old. And you can't replace them, and you can't find light bulbs that will fit in them. And so let's say maybe 1/6 of the light fixtures are out, and there's nothing we can do about it without ripping out the ceiling and replacing all the lights. And so that was going to be a big ordeal to replace the lights. But I thought, before I'm called to go, I think I've got to help the church figure that out and fix that. So those were some of the initial things that I saw when I first became pastor at Chapel. I started to say 75 years ago, 7 years ago. So I'm going to kind of focus on each of the 4 opportunities that I saw. And so the first one is helping a church transition from being a place to a people. From the churches where we go on Sundays, how do we help a church get out of that mindset? And so one of the first things I did was form affinity groups, which included a women's luncheon, a men's breakfast. At one time we had a walking club. There's a fermenting the faith group that meets over beers once a month and talks about theology. Classes that are topical for people's interests. At one time we had a contemplative prayer group. Again, we may circle back to some of these like the walking club and contemplative prayer group. We offer an occasional grief support group. I've got an ongoing Enneagram community of practice, since that's a skill set that I can bring to the table. And one of the highest compliments I've gotten at Chapel since I've been there is a retired pastor who's a member of the congregation actually noticed that this work had been done, that the transition has been made, that they recognize they're a community now instead of just a place to go on Sundays. I'm really proud of that. So what's funny is I put this PowerPoint together before I came down with COVID 2 days ago. So COVID-19 means we can't go to church. It was an opportunity to teach the church that it's more than the place. When you're separated from the place like we were for several months, it was an opportunity to teach them that the church is a people instead of a place. Then there was this mindset that we're a small church, we can't do much. And I wanted to challenge that. And in a minute, I'll tell you how the biggest way that I've challenged that. And I think they're beginning to realize that they can do more than they realized. And I'm really pleased with that too. Oops. And there's the community, right? The place is behind them, but this was a recent kind of video we made where we handed out sunglasses with Chapel by the Sea on it, and we came outside, and aren't they beautiful? I mean, they're just beautiful people. Some interesting people. I could tell you stories about each of the folks that you see here. So let's see. The next challenge was, or opportunity, right, was the idea that the church doubles in size during snowbird season, which is a challenge and an opportunity. So when I first got to Chapel 7 years ago, the mentality was that snowbirds are guests, not members. Now, I didn't start this. They had already figured this one out, but to offer associate membership, which allowed people to keep their membership back home and yet have all the rights of a voting member, full participation in chapel. That was already, I didn't do that. They already figured that out. We did begin since COVID to include snowbirds among our board, our church board. We figured out we could Zoom. We figured out that snowbirds can join us from Minnesota or Michigan or wherever they may be, and they can join us at board meetings. And so in most every small group situation, we've made hybrid so that snowbirds can be full participants. So they're part of our board now. They're part of our small group classes. Anything we do small group wise, our snowbirds are included. And so our snowbirds are very active participants year round, and that's new since COVID. And so that was one of the gifts of COVID, at least for our little church. One of the things that has, is kind of a continual challenge, parking spaces on Clearwater Beach are challenging to find, of course, seating. And so we have an agreement with the city of Clearwater to use their public parking lot on Sunday mornings. And then we begin to offer multiple services for Easter and Christmas Eve. We were underway to begin a second service during peak season when COVID hit, and then it kind of eradicated our need. And maybe one day we'll get back to that, but we are not quite there yet. And so that's what this is a snapshot, just a screenshot of a live stream service from a couple of Sundays ago. Live streaming was something we were already talking about. COVID kind of made us expedite that. All right, so this is the third one, the unifying and clarifying language. One of the tricky things about being interdenominational is this word right here, non-doctrinal. Most of our parishioners come from denominational churches, and so they orient their life together around a set of orthodoxy, around a set of beliefs. And so the switch to become non-doctrinal is tricky for folks who have kind of grown up in with a set of beliefs as the unifying principle. And so if it's not doctrine, then what does unify us as a people? And so my work has been to shift the mindset from a unifying orthodoxy to a unifying orthopraxy. And so I got some help about a little over a year ago now, from Columbia Seminary. They have a Lilly Grant, and that Lilly Grant is to help churches do this kind of work, to help them kind of think deeply about who they are. So we actually received this grant from Columbia Seminary, which kind of forced us to do the work of clarifying some language and figuring out what our orthopraxy looks like, our unifying orthopraxy. You might call it a rule of life. I've heard it called a rule of life, but we call it core commitments. And so what does that look like? Well, that was our Saturday workshop. You see my Pinnacle colleague, David Brown, here. Because of the grant, we were able to hire David and Pinnacle to come help us with this. Through his study of our church, he put together this word cloud of descriptive words that the people used when describing their church. And then these are the people of the church gathered to think deeply about who we are as a church community. And so I won't read, you're not interested in all of this, but we have this missional aspiration. Chapel by the Sea aspires to be a beacon of God's love, inviting people into a vibrant life with Christ. And then we have these 10 core commitments, which are basically 10 verbs. So you see this graphic here. I actually put this graphic on a coaster. This was part of the grant. We used funds from the grant to put these 10 words and the church logo on a coaster that we gave out to people, just to help them remember the things that unite us: welcoming, gathering, praying, giving, serving, forgiving, singing, growing, respecting, loving. And I got to tell you, I love the work that my people did. You know, at the end of the day, you know, this is the kind of church I would want to be a part of. A church that, if they're really trying to do all these things, that's a church I want to be a part of, and certainly a church I want to pastor. All right, building updates. Dun, dun, dun. So my initial impression, this beautiful little church on the outside, when you walked in, it looked and smelled like grandma's house. And so I was like, oh my goodness, it needs some freshening up. It's got this gorgeous location, this beautiful exterior, but the inside needs some help. The 75-year-old light fixtures, they can't be repaired or replaced, so we need a new ceiling, we need new lighting. Our electronic organ was beginning to fail, and so we put a team together to determine what we want to do with that. And they decided to purchase a used pipe organ out of a church in Owensboro, Kentucky. And so we've bought that, it's in process, it's being built at an organ builder's workshop in North Carolina. So we need a new ceiling, we need new lighting fixtures, we need this new organ, which requires a chancel remodel. Then basically we decided to remodel the entire sanctuary. And that has been the longest, most complicated, most tedious process I've ever been a part of. Finally, our plans were resubmitted to the city just this past week, and we are awaiting final approval so that we can actually start this work. But it has been a long, arduous road that I learned a few things along the way. I bet some of you have been through similar projects that could have taught me a few things had I had ears to listen. So there's the church that was around Christmas. You can tell a church as it is now. Here's the architect's rendering. The color scheme is a little off. It's a little gray for our taste, but you know, the big things happening, the installation of a real live pipe organ. These are the current windows we have. We're actually adding windows on the other side as well. It's basically a blank wall over here right now. Me if I can go back. Yeah, so you can see it's got doors and whatnot on this side right now, but we're going to be putting stained glass windows on the other side. We're going to be adding screens. You know, we're getting rid of the, 50-year-old carpet that probably is what made it smell like grandma's house. So it's a lot, and we're getting there. Pray for us. All right. Larry asked me to share about media. I wouldn't say we're ahead of the curve on media, but here's what we're doing. We got live stream worship. We're on YouTube and Facebook. I've already mentioned that we're hybrid in board meetings and Bible studies, all the small groups. We have experimented with online sermon-based small groups. Our snowbirds especially have enjoyed that. That's been able to keep them connected even more fully. And I would say it's experimental at this point. We have online giving like most churches. Unlike a lot of churches, we also offer online payments for things that people pay the church for. Like you want to buy a poinsettia at Christmas, you can pay for that online. If you want to buy a ticket to the ladies' luncheon, you can pay for that online. And what I thought might be fun to talk about with you guys, since you are some elders in ministry in the faith, is this little thing right here, artificial intelligence. I am and my marketing team, we're beginning to explore some uses of AI in the church. And so I thought I would talk just for a minute about that, and then I'll open up for dialogue. If I can get to the next slide. One of the, I guess, vendors that we're looking at for help with AI is this pastors.ai. It's really amazing what this can do. Let me show you a couple of things. So one of the guys on my marketing team took a sermon from, I think it was June the 2nd or something like that. And he gave it to pastors.ai and they showed us what they could do with it. And so I'm just going to click through here. It can offer summaries of what was in the sermon. It can offer Bible study discussion guide. It can offer a 5-day devotional based on the pastor's sermon. And then it can also give video reels and clips. I want to show you just a couple of these. I hope it works. Yay. Are you still seeing, what are you seeing now? Are you seeing the?
I think you have to go to another window. We're just still seeing the PowerPoint.
Okay.
You can use, if you're using a PC, you can do Alt-Tab to go to another window. But I think you just have to screen share another window.
Okay. Yeah, I think. How about now?
Okay.
Okay. All right. So this is the sermon summary. And so it says, Chapel of the Sea, Rhonda Blevins, June the 2nd. And I read through this sermon summary and I was blown away. Like, it said my sermon better than I said it myself. In today's sermon, we explored the profound concept of respect. Of course, that was one of our core commitments. I was doing a 10-week series on our core commitments. It's amazing what this thing did. Respect means to see again. The etymology of the word respect teaches us that it means to see someone again and again. God's love for our enemies, the parable of the Good Samaritan. I am just blown away by what by what this thing can do. All right, I'm going to stop my share. I'm going to have to keep stopping and resharing, I think. I want to show you the Bible study discussion guide now, if I can. Okay. Are you seeing the discussion guide, Andy?
Yes.
Okay.
I can see it. Thank you.
All right. So it takes the sermon and it basically condenses it, right, and packages it for small group Bible study discussion. So you've got your Bible readings that, I would have probably given them the whole Jonah passage, but they just picked one verse. The parable of the Good Samaritan. Observation questions. What does the word respect mean according to the sermon, and how is it derived etymologically? Why did Jonah initially refuse to go to Nineveh, and what was his reaction when God showed mercy to the Ninevites? So observation questions, interpretation questions, application questions. Reflect on a time when you felt disrespected. How did it affect your relationship with the person who disrespected you? How might seeing again and again change that dynamic? Again, I'm dumbfounded with how good this app or program did. I'm going to give you one more and then I'll stop. Let's see, the 5-day devotional. Okay. One more time, Andy. You looking at the 5-day devotional?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's up.
So it breaks down the sermon into 5 kind of nuggets. So day 1, respect means to see again. It gives a passage of scripture and a reflection. Think of someone in your life whom you find difficult to understand. How can you make an effort to see them again and understand their perspective better today? That's great. Day 2, God's love for our enemies. It challenges us to accept that God loves even those we consider our enemies. Reflection. Think of someone you consider an enemy or someone you have a hard time loving. All right, I'm going to stop there. It also can break down into reels or kind of bite-sized nuggets, if you will. And now you're seeing the PowerPoint again, I hope.
Yes,
All right.
it's bad.
I'm done. I'm done with all that then. Here's a question I think might be interesting for us to discuss is ethics of AI in the church. As I've begun to kind of dabble in AI, here are some of the questions I've had. Should pastors use AI for writing sermons? I thought it would be fun just to say, okay, ChatGPT, give me a 1,600 word sermon based on whatever it was, John chapter 4, verses 1 through 16. It was really bad. It was a really bad sermon. But I thought it was fun to try it. What about writing sections or paragraphs for sermons? I wanted to include a nugget in a sermon recently about how the founding fathers, how they didn't want a two-party system. And I thought, I know that's true from history class, but I want to see if ChatGPT can just write up one paragraph about that for me. And sure enough, it did, and I used it in my own language, of course. Is that ethical, right? I don't know. I feel like it's okay, but yeah, it kind of is questionable. What about sermon research? Yes, but you have to double check it and make sure it's accurate. In my mind, I say yes, but maybe you would disagree with that. Sermon series outlines, I've dabbled in that. What about writing liturgy, calls to worship, etc.? Oops. What about what we just saw with pastors.ai, repurposing sermons in writing summaries or Bible study guides or 5-day devotionals? What about writing emails? What about writing job descriptions for church staff, which I've actually done with using AI? What about writing policies for church? What about website material? I've done that. I've used AI for that. What about social media content? What about headshot or photo enhancement? So these are some of the things that we could be using AI for, and there's not really anybody too much out there talking about the ethics of that. So I told you that Larry's assignment to me was daunting. He said, tell us why and how you're an effective pastor. I was like, well, I don't know. Yeah. So I asked ChatGPT, I said, describe an effective pastor. I just want you to, just for fun, as an example, I want you to see what ChatGPT did for me. So a strong spiritual leader with deep faith and knowledge, guidance and inspiration. Excellent communication skills, empathy and compassion, integrity, authenticity, visionary leadership, community engagement, administrative skills, resilience and adaptability, mentorship and discipleship. It was actually pretty darn good what ChatGPT suggested an effective pastor would look like. Barna wrote an article just earlier this month. It's called The Ethics of AI, How Far is Too Far? So in their polling, they determined that U.S. Christians prefer a human touch for most church functions. And so green is a human could do this better. Pink, AI could do this task better. Blue is AI or a human would do this task at the same level, and then orange is not sure. So spiritual counseling, mental health counseling, a big majority, humans could do this better. Building relationship, writing sermons, 63%, humans could do this better. Creating a leadership development plan. You're kind of getting shorter on the humans could do this better. Recommending topics for sermons. Only 50% of people said that a human could do this task better. Online content, less than half. Organizing or creating music set lists for worship, less than half. Financial advice to assist with church budgeting, 39%. Creating online content for outreach, 35%. Helping churches reach more individuals online, 29%, and administrative tasks, 28%. In this article, it says Christians are willing to embrace AI where it enhances operational efficiency in church, but remain protective of spiritual and relational areas. And then final quote of the day, as AI continues to advance, ongoing discussions about its ethical implications will be crucial. So that's one of the things that I'm interested in lately. You might say struggling with, because I would say I'm a little ahead of my peers when it comes to engaging technology. And so I'm probably ahead of the curve as far as embracing AI. But I also want to make sure I'm ethical in doing so. So I think that'll be an ongoing challenge for me and other pastors in the days ahead as AI becomes more and more prevalent. So that's me in Chapel by the Sea. So why don't I stop sharing and kind of turn it back to Larry, you or Bob, who needs to take over now?
Okay, do we have questions? You'll need to unmute yourself before you speak. Everyone is currently muted.
This is Clay Morford from Knoxville, Tennessee, a chaplain still in chaplaincy. I noticed in your sanctuary that you had both the American flag and the Christian flag, one on either side of the auditorium in the front. Has your church had any discussion about the flags and the use of the American flag as an equal or integral part of the worship service?
Yeah, it's a great question. My answer is no. I would love to engage that conversation, but I haven't seen that they're ready for that. And I like my job. What's interesting is when we do this remodel, of course, everything will have to be removed from the sanctuary. And it'll be, I do see that as an opportunity to engage that question. So thanks for the reminder to do that, Clay. There's a lot of Tennessee folks on this call. So I'm a Maryville native.
I was in your fair city earlier today.
Is that right? Yeah, God's country. The team leader for my Pinnacle team arrived. Mark Tidsworth is here, so appreciate the support, Mark.
Rhonda, since nobody else is jumping in, I have a little experience with the AI, and in discussing it with a federal judge friend of mine, I've learned now that lawyers, if they use AI, are required to report that in their brief. And so it seemed to me that would be one factor. I think it'd be easy for you to say you were looking for this illustration and here's what AI gave me. And then you're just being honest in where you got it.
Yeah, okay.
I also read, so go ahead, I'm sorry.
I could just corroborate what Bob just said. I have a son who's an attorney, and his firm is putting on some trainings for the attorneys and educating them on how to use AI and how to reference that if they include it in one of their briefs. So just to back that up.
Thank you.
Rhonda, can you hear me?
Yeah, is that Chuck?
Yes.
Yeah. Hey,
That's
Good to
Chuck.
see
Rhonda, good
you.
to see you. Yeah. Good to see you. And you landed in a great place. My
I did.
brother,
Yeah.
before I passed away, was an attorney in Clearwater. So
Mm.
uh, my sister-in-law and the rest of the family had moved up to Tarpon Springs,
Oh, wow.
but frequently they go to Clearwater Beach. It's a beautiful, beautiful place.
Yeah.
And I wonder, have you taken care of the Scientology problem in Clearwater? Uh, is it
It,
still the headquarters or is it?
yeah, it is a huge dynamic in my city. If you come to Clearwater in downtown, there Scientology has bought up swaths of property downtown. Some of it they claim, some of it they did it under the auspices of LLCs of various kinds, and those facilities are sitting empty because they were mad at the city because of a land swap that they wanted and go through, and so yeah, Scientology is a huge factor here. The city misses out on huge chunks of tax revenue because of Scientology's a bill. Finally, they were able to get a tax exempt status. I forget what year that was through the IRS, and so the city misses out on a lot of revenue because this is their flag, what they call their flag, their spiritual headquarters. And every day I'll drive through and I'll see the members of their clergy, which they call the Sea Org, and they're dressed, they have a uniform that they wear, and of course they have menial jobs. They're working in the hotel and they're driving the bus, and anyway, it's a problem. It's a real problem here in Clearwater.
To go back just a moment to AI, which I by no means an expert on this. It seems to me that there would be legal issues, there would be ethical issues, but also, on things that where the pastor, for example, in preparing a sermon, has to know the people to whom she is speaking, as well as the substance of what is going to be said. Does AI, is it able to bridge that gap? And the other thing it seems to me is that, if we, and I'm talking about preaching because I guess that's an area where I think a lot about. I mean, would that conceivably, I can imagine somebody who really is lazy at preparing a sermon, just turning it over
Mm-hmm.
to that, and you lose the whole idea of the fact that a sermon is not just sitting out there apart from somebody who's preaching it. It is a message, delivered. So that's a very good question. I think it maybe even moves beyond ethical, legal boundaries to what am I going to do that's going to ultimately hinder my being creative, by speaking to the needs of the people
Mm-hmm.
to whom I'm, who are in the congregation, questions like that. And what ultimately does it do to the pastor? I think it would bleed from the pastor, the creativity, the encounter with the text, all of that hard work.
Mm-hmm.
But that is so important, I think, to proclamation.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Chuck. That struggle, that weekly struggle, Sunday's coming. um, anything that, if it helps, right? If it helps the pastor in the creative process, if it helps the pastor in the in the pastor's own learning process, I could see that being beneficial. But there could be, you know, the abuse of it, right? I think there's a really fine line there. Where is this laziness and where is this efficiency? And I think that answer is, I don't think we have that just yet. At least I don't.
Well, I've used AI, and for the fun of it, I've asked for sermons much shorter than yours. If you'll ask for a shorter sermon, it will be better.
Oh, okay.
But what I found is it's very generic. It's good, but it's generic. It doesn't have that the empathetic aspect of it. And if you got up and read what AI said, the smart people in your congregation would detect where it came from, I think. But where I have used it, if I may say, is in summarizing some of the theologians' opinions about, for example, our church right now is doing a seminar, a 3-part seminar on the Bible and gender. So I ask it to summarize in about 300 words what Walter Brueggemann has to say about Leviticus 18:20, which is man shouldn't lie with a man, and also Sam Ballantyne, what those two theologians said about it. And Sam has since died, but on the phone, I read to him what AI said. He said, that's scary. But that's how I've used it. And it's at my age, being asked to do something like this, I know how to use it. I know how to give credit for it. In Sunday school class, I was subbing on, I think it's Exodus 17. It's the monologue of Moses. And I just let AI write me a monologue of Moses, and I read it to the class and then gave credit to AI. So
yeah,
it's the ethics of it's going to be up to an individual, because it's going to be awfully easy to get AI to do something. Now, they do not give sources. They will not tell you that Brueggemann said this in such and such a book. So they will not do that. Have you found that to be true?
No, I have not asked. I have not used it in that way. So
okay,
that's interesting. Yeah.
Well, I asked it one time to do something. It says we don't do that.
What did you ask it to do, Bob?
to give me I think I was looking for a source, and it wouldn't give me a source.
Gotcha. I asked it to write a job description for, I think it's an office manager, for a church office manager, and I said, please write a job description for a church office manager, which includes this and this and this. It created a great job description, way better than I could have.
And we're talking in seconds. We're not talking about minutes. It does it in seconds.
Efficient, yes. Ethical, I think so. It's a job description.
It depends.
In searching for information, I found that Microsoft Edge Copilot that goes along with Microsoft Edge uses AI, and it does list sources when you're asking it about something. It will list sources.
So say that again to the place where you go.
Microsoft Edge Copilot. if you look at Edge in the upper right-hand corner, if it's enabled, you can click on that and it opens a search window, and it will help you summarize information. You know, with the regular Google search, it just gives you individual websites that you can click on, but the Copilot summarizes it for you and then gives the references at the bottom where the information is found. I found it very useful in solving internet problems, technical problems. So often, you know, you don't know the language of the router or whatever you're dealing with. You're not sure what to call it. And so you can use that to narrow your search or find information about all kinds of things. And I found it very useful. It's Microsoft Edge, and the extension is the Copilot extension.
Thank you.
One of the things I do for Pinnacle is I build websites for churches, and I'll usually have a couple of clients at any given time. And getting content from the client is the hardest part of building a website. You know, please just give me a biography of the pastor. Please just give me a welcome. And I've found that Chat GPT is my go-to. You know, please write a welcome for X and X Baptist Church and talk about how warm and friendly they are, and et cetera. And so it'll you know, give this content, and you have to be specific for a church website. You know, give me 2 paragraphs about X. And so it'll give me some content, and then I'll shoot that back to my contact at the church and say, hey, here's a place to start. Edit this and send it back to me. And that makes my process seem to go better. It's still slow. But website content,
Why not?
why not, in my mind?
Rhonda, let me ask you something, if you don't mind. To give you a chance, I work with Rhonda, so I know she's an excellent pastor, and that's why you all have invited her to be with you. And so I was thinking about Chapel by the Sea, their self-perception. I know you've been working with this over time. Their self-perception of them as a little chapel over there by the sea on the beach at Clearwater versus an engaging, active body of Christ church that is moving from pastoral size, what's family size, a pastoral size to program size, is moving through some size transit and is becoming something different. Their mindset, their self-perception has had to change quite a bit in order to allow for that to happen. What do you think? And you've been a big part of that. What do you think are some of the contributors, some of the things you've done that have contributed to the shifting in their mindsets?
Yeah.
That's a great question, Mark. Thanks. One of the, you know, the small mentality, we're just a little church, we can't do much together. They were amazed with their ability to raise $1 million just like that. With this building campaign, of course, we launched a capital campaign, and they had never had a capital campaign, really, not in any kind of strong way. And they met and they surpassed that goal easy, just so easy. And so that's one thing. I also think we have an annual fundraiser for a local nonprofit, and they come together around that, and it's a big deal. And that's, you know, it's a ministry that, you know, it's a food pantry and a shelter and et cetera, and domestic violence shelter as well. And so every year, this annual event, they come together around that. No, I didn't do that, though. You're asking me about my leadership in that. I think that these affinity groups have been really important with that. especially the women's group. So we launched this women's program, I'll say 2019. And the women weren't gathering in any kind of significant way at all. Nobody was gathering. And so when we started this women's luncheon, is how it started, it turns out they really liked gathering together. And it turns out, I think, when the women, especially of the church, gather together, they're going to start making things happen. And so that there's been a lot of organic movement because of that. Those are a couple of things. I would probably have to think more deeply about your question, darn you, Mark.
Reverend Blevins, what do you all do to develop your spirituality base? You mentioned that very emphatically. Centering prayer groups or things like that, Bible studies.
Yeah, I have a director of education who offers ongoing classes, several different options. One of the trickiest things for us with that has been, because we're so broad and diverse. My director of education has been really good about having groups that sort of meet people where they are. And so the Thursday morning Bible study kind of nurtures a more conservative faction, if you will, within the church. The Tuesday evening group nurtures a more progressive sort of wing of the church. The church never has had a strong adult Sunday school program or small group program. And so when we started experimenting with the sermon-based small groups, I kind of wanted to see how that would go. And it was still largely the people who are willing to go to a class that participated in the small group, in the sermon-based small group project. So I'm trying to engage folks outside of traditional Sunday school small group type of angles. For instance, the fermenting the faith. I was trying to find a way to get, especially some of our younger members, something that might engage them. And so I know in other places it's called Theology on Tap, but the young man leading the charge for us didn't want to use that language, so he called it fermenting the faith. So trying to do some non-traditional things, because the old Sunday school small group model hasn't worked for us traditionally. It hasn't been part of the church culture. We'll do kind of along with that. I'll teach classes from time to time. My Enneagram community of practice is very much spirituality. We talk a lot about Richard Rohr. I don't know if you guys, I'm sure you're familiar with Richard Rohr's work, and he's done a lot of work with the Enneagram. We'll use different kinds of curriculum. The great courses, we've used the great courses. We've used Amy Jill Levine. We've used Phyllis Tickle. Those are the more progressive end of the spectrum. We used Borg and Crossan. Then we've also used Adam Hamilton as far as some curriculums go.
Rhonda, David Sapp, what's the denominational mix like of your folks? Is it heavier Methodist or Lutheran or whatever? And include in that, if you would, people who don't come from a church background.
Yeah. I've never broken it down quite that way. I know we've got a good many recovering Catholics. Mm-hmm. We have a good many Presbyterians, Methodists. That's probably our top three. Then we've got Baptists and Lutherans, very few Episcopalians. We have a couple of Orthodox. And then, what was your question about those who didn't come from church at all?
Just how do they factor into the mix? How many,
Okay.
what percentage of your congregation would you guess
Yeah,
from that group?
not too many.
Not too many anywhere.
Not, yeah, not too many. Mostly transplants from other denominational kinds of experiences.
Okay. Just wondered.
We have, and then we actually have a few folks who grew up in an interdenominational sort of situation. Not too many grew up within the church and are still there, 50 years or 70 years later, but a handful.
Is this an all-adult church?
Largely, yeah, pretty much. We've tried, with Sunday school, and we have 2 or 3 children that come pretty regularly, mostly my own. Preachers' kids have to go to church, right?
Yeah.
Rhonda, are most of the members, you say about half the membership is from 365 theoretically. Do they come from the mainland, or I know they're probably not many places other than condominiums or something over in Clearwater Beach, my recollection, unless they done, there've been more, but do they come from Clearwater itself or the surrounding areas?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would call us a regional church. Although the church was founded specifically for residents of Clearwater Beach, which was a very narrow sort of population at our founding. There's a neighborhood, North Beach, it's residential. Half of those homes, at least half, sit empty half the year. So there's another community nearby that's largely residential. Again, most of those homes sit empty half the year. And then the big hurdle to truly embrace our regional sort of ideology is when people that live on the mainland think about coming to the beach, they think about how miserable the traffic is. Of course, I always tell them, well, if you're coming for church at 10 o'clock in the morning, you're not going to experience that because that's not when the tourists are traveling that way. Hold on. I'm in a call, babe. 10-year-old, summertime. So I would say 75% of our members live on Clearwater Beach or not the mainland, and another 25 are from the mainland, I would say.
Rhonda, I would be interested, unless somebody else has a better question, in your sermon preparation schedule. Do you plan way ahead? What's like it week to week? And how much do you think about who's going to be listening to you?
I am not a month ahead planner. I'm a week ahead planner.
Okay.
I admire those people who can do a sermon a month ahead. So Sunday evening, Monday morning, I start thinking about the sermon for the next week. And what was your second question, Bob?
I don't remember.
How much do I think about the people?
Yeah.
Man, I think a lot about the people. What they're going through, what I, best I can.
Do you do lectionary any?
I do some. I do a combination. I'll do series, and then sometimes I'll preach lectionary. I'm not married to it, but it's helpful sometimes.
How long are your sermons?
So Mark Tidsworth made our Pinnacle team read this book a while back called Talk Like Ted. It was all about the requirements for doing a TED Talk. And there were a lot of statistics about how 18 minutes is the very maximum for human attention span for a public speaker. And so that is I hardly ever go past 18 minutes.
Okay.
Thanks, Mark.
Reverend Blevins, you are a very, very busy minister, obviously. Do you have a support group?
Yeah, I do. I do feel like my Pinnacle team is my support group. Every now and then I'll throw out a crowdsourcing question, or with a smaller group, kind of ask for advice. And we meet fairly regularly, so it's a great team of colleagues that I lean on a lot. And it's some of the brightest and best out there. It's a great team that Mark has assembled, a diverse team. And, there's not a person on that team that I don't respect and admire at some level. And so I'm very thankful to be a part of that team.
It must be working. I don't see a gray hair in your head.
Well, there are these things called salons.
Oh.
It's not artificial intelligence, but it's similar.
I think we probably ought to be sensitive on the time. She's getting over COVID, and we don't want to overextend her.
Right.
But this has been a fantastic presentation, Rhonda.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you. The preparation and the challenges. I mean, I have a hard time getting into my email, let alone worrying about the ethics of artificial intelligence. But this has been a learning experience for me.
Well, I thought I'd give you guys something to ponder, and I do think that's a subject ripe for some really good discussion with some elders of the church, and so that's why I threw it on you.
Anything else we need to do, Bob?
No, we don't take an offering, so I guess there's not. Any other word before we leave? Just to remind all of you that we're in a 2-year cycle, at the end of which we'll have a funeral service for the seminary friends and put her to bed. So thank you, Rhonda, very much. It was very helpful. And I think down the line, I'd love to have a Zoom session on strictly AI. And so we might see if people are interested in that and get us an expert or two to help us. So anything else from anyone?
Thank you, Rhonda.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Thanks, Rhonda.
Yeah. Thank you.
Rhonda.
It's an honor to be with you and see some old friends and make some new ones today. So thanks so much.
And
Take care of
Larry, for the
yourself.
invitation.
Okay.
and thank you, Andy, for being in Alaska.